Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Planning Committee. I have to read out a statement regarding the online streaming. May I remind everyone present this meeting will be broadcast live via the internet and a recording archived for future viewing. Can I take any apologies for absence, please? I haven't had any. I have apologies from Councillor Matthew Lloyd. Any other apologies? Thank you. Moving to minutes of the last meeting. Move the minutes. Seconded. Thank you. And any declarations of interest? Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to item 9, planning application 2013-01249 FUL Haydock House, 1 Halton Road, Barry. I was part of the Barry Town Council Planning Committee which debated this back in, I think it was 2013 or 2014, and also at this committee which discussed that a few months later as a local member. I'm looking at this, of course, with a fresh set of eyes, not least because I can't remember quite what I said in 2014. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Parker.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll be leaving for the Lanark Vineyard item. I have acted for them before, and I think it's correct and proper that I leave.
And just to clarify, that is the item of late business under section 10 of the agenda. Any other declarations of interest? Okay, moving on to building reclamation applications determined by delegated powers. Move and note. Thank you. Planning applications, item 5, determined by delegated powers. Move and note. Thank you. Item 6, appeals. Vicky, do you want to say something?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll just draw members' attention to the one appeal decision that we have on the agenda today, and it relates to a proposal for a detached house on land at Landdock, near the Landdock Hospital. The two issues that were relevant in the appeal, one was design and one was affordable housing. There was a sort of backstop position, if you like, because we had already granted consent for a detached house on this plot, but under the previous unitary development plan and before the affordable housing policy was applied to sites for net gain of one dwelling or more. When this application came before us, it was not only an entirely new design approach that we weren't comfortable with, but it was also the issue of affordable housing with the adoption of the LDP and the adoption of the policy relating to affordable housing for one dwelling or more that was relevant to this application, and the applicant was not prepared to agree to the provisions for affordable housing. I bring it to your attention merely because it's an interesting decision from the inspector that fully supported the council's stance in applying that policy, in recognising the shift in policy position between the UDP and the LDP, and supporting our view that that policy was relevant and that you couldn't rely on a previous extant consent to then get a second bite of the cherry, if you like, with this new application. They also agreed with us in terms of the design approach there, but it will be a useful one for us. Particularly, members will recall the matter that came forward under enforcement for a house in Wick that members considered. I think it was last committee or the committee before, and this appeal decision helps the council's position on that matter as well. Okay, thanks, Chair.
Thank you. If no members wish to make any comments, ask those to be moved. Thank you very much. Item 7 is delegated trees list. Moved and note. Thank you. Move to item 8 now. This is enforcement action. I think, Vicky, you're going to take us through both of these.
Thanks, Chair. The first one then relates to land and buildings at Rectory Stables, south of Langduff near Cowbridge. The existing use of the site is authorised use for horse-related activity, and that the report sets out that back in 2016 a whole range of works and activities at the site were brought under regulation through approval of the retention of the equestrian facilities on the site, including the menage and the horse walker and the hard surfacing. Since then, various alterations have been made to the existing building on the site. The stable block, which has been extended and altered, they don't have the benefit of permitted development rights. All the works needed require permission, and some of the works in particular are considered to be harmful. If members would like to just observe the photograph on page 34, which shows the works to the stable block, including a sort of box roof kind of dormer that's been added to the stable block, for various ancillary activities which may be acceptable on a horse-related activity site, but there's at this stage no planning application has been submitted for these works. The works themselves are considered to be harmful, which is why we're recommending that an enforcement notice be served to seek their removal. And also there's a partially completed building on the site, which is shown on the photograph on page 35, and in its current state is clearly unsightly. We have been seeking a planning application and none has been forthcoming yet, so we're seeking enforcement action against both of those unauthorised works.
Thank you. Any members wish to make any comments? Move officer recommendations. Thank you. Seconded. All in favour? Thank you very much. That's unanimous. 8.2, please, on the enforcement action.
Thank you, Chair. This one relates to land and buildings at Rosedew Farm at Llantwit Major. As the report sets out, there was a previous planning permission for various works, including the demolition of some agricultural buildings on the site, and thereafter the construction of a biomass unit and 12 log cabins and associated works. That planning permission was subject to a number of conditions, including some pre-commencement conditions, which are all set out in the report. The issue here is that works have commenced on site and significant amount of works have happened on site without those conditions being discharged. Of particular concern are the conditions in relation to ecology. The original planning application was being supported by a bat survey, conditions relating to bats being protected on the site in the existing barns, and the need for the developer to seek a licence from NRW to undertake works which may or may not affect the bats, and none of those conditions have been complied with. As the report sets out, that is a serious matter. It has been referred to the police, and action needs to be taken in respect of that. That's almost a side issue, but as far as we're concerned, the works are now currently unauthorised. They don't benefit from that planning permission in view of the fact that they have currently breached those conditions. Now, it may well be that a number of those breaches can be brought back under planning control through variation of condition applications or non-material amendment applications, and we do have some of those before us. I should at this point draw your attention to the late reps, which is just a note from the officer updating members to say that details have been submitted in respect of various NMA applications in respect of some of those conditions, and also a licence application has now been made to NRW, and we wait to see what NRW do with that in light of the activity that's already taken place on the site. It's a bit of an unusual one, this one, insofar as we are seeking an injunction to stop any further works of demolition for the last barn, to prevent any further unauthorised activity taking place and any further threat to bats that may potentially be on the site. So the reason for that is a bit legalistic, but it's rather than serving a stop notice, which would effectively be stopping works that aren't happening, it's to say don't demolish the last barn. An injunction is the better tool to actually undertake that. So we're seeking authorisation for a court injunction to stop any further demolition of the site, and also in respect of the other unauthorised works, that all the development that's undertaken on the site at the moment, the 4 log cabins, the biomass boiler, and any other associated works that have already happened, for enforcement action to be taken against those on the assumption that it's not regularised by other means. We're obviously hopeful that it won't come to that, and we will be able to bring it all back under planning control through appropriate variations, but it's seeking the whole gambit of powers to enable us to take action if and when it comes to that. Okay.
Thank you. Any members wish to comment? Move officer recommendations. Seconded. Thank you very much. All in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. Move on now to planning applications. First planning applications 2013/01249/FUL Haydock House 1 Holton Road Barry. Marcus, I believe you're going to talk on this one.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is quite strange in many ways. It's quite an old application which is coming back before you, but those members who were on the committee before will remember that this was determined, I think, early in 2014 by the committee resolved to approve it, subject to a legal agreement under Section 106, designating certain requirements to be paid before the development could commence. Since that time, the members may be aware that we entered into some discussions with our housing colleagues around the requirements for Section 106 on schemes which were wholly affordable and less than 25 units, and determined that the money really was travelling in a circle because it was social housing grant and or Section 106 money being taken out of a social housing scheme and put back into a Section 106 pot, and so it was a bit of a circular argument. So we decided that, and this was decided by the previous administration as well, that the better option was to limit the Section 106 contributions to schemes which were bigger than 25 units for solely social housing. This scheme obviously would have fallen within that bracket, and due to various issues, including, I think, purchase and land issues around the development, never actually got signed off as a legal agreement and didn't progress. And so now what has happened is that the Housing Association has come back to us and asked to, if you like, to put it more in accordance with the current policies in terms of no contribution through Section 106. They have taken the opportunity to slightly amend the scheme, so where previously there was an external staircase on the back of the building, that has now been removed, so the building is actually slightly smaller. There is no external staircase. They've built the staircase within although the staircase will be provided within the building. Other than that, it remains the same scheme with 15 affordable units, 5 parking spaces, and a retail unit stroke possible A3 cafe unit at the front of the property on ground floor. The units are 12 one-bedroom flats and 3 two-bedroom flats. The only other changes are slight changes to the window detailing, but other than that, it's pretty much exactly the same scheme as came before committee back in 2004, and the real issue is just removing the requirement for a Section 106 contribution.
Thank you, Marcus. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for that, Marcus. As the local member, I just want to sort of start by just querying some of the process on this, because the report that we have in front of us is based around the application that was submitted in 2013 and approved by this committee in 2014. And I spoke at the time, and my comments from that time are on page 61, as are the comments from Barry Town Council's Planning Committee at that time as well. My starting point for this is really, to say, a process issue, which is that this was determined here, almost 4 years ago, that many people were consulted upon this at the time, and yet this has appeared to me as a local member effectively out of the blue several years down the line. So I was rather surprised to find this in the bundle and find comments from me that I wrote sort of almost 4 years ago being included here as part of the information to councillors. The same goes for the other information provided at that time. I recognise there have not been huge amounts of changes to the plans that as they stand. They are perhaps slightly better than they were when they were approved by Planning Committee in 2014. But there is, I think, a strong process issue here. That's something that was considered important enough to be returning to full Planning Committee almost a full 4 years after it was approved by Planning Committee for variations, should, after that length of time, really also involve a level of consultation with the normal statutory consultees. Barry Town Council, for example, there are 7 of the 8 people on the Planning Committee now, but not on the Planning Committee back then. There is a different member of staff supporting that Planning Committee. Of the 4 different councillors at different levels in the Buttrells ward, 3 of them were not on the council at the time that this was being discussed. The occupancy of the building next door has changed. I don't know whether the same people are living in the houses to the rear of this facility as were when they were consulted in 2013 to 2014. And the information provided here regarding the housing need has also presumably changed since that time, unless it's quite static over a 4-year period, which is unlikely. I'm sure I could be picked up on any one individual point of those points as to whether that's entirely accurate, but the point I'm making here is how as a local member, I am a little concerned that something has come almost out of the blue 4 years later. I wonder how other members would feel if something were to turn up on their doorstep without really the time and ability to pass this to their local town and community council, to pass this to others. There is an additional issue here, which I think is about the particular, Section 106. This is a result of a change in council policy that was introduced by Cabinet on 5th September 2016. But other changes have taken place in that time as well. Pieces of legislation have come in. Different policy standards have been adopted. What I would therefore request, first of all, before we have a full discussion upon this proposal, is that we defer this so that consultation takes place in the normal manner, so that Barry Town Council's current planning committee can make comments on it, that the other member of the Vale of Glamorgan council from my ward can make comments on this, if he is so minded to do so, and that others who are asked their opinion on this as well, because I think it is unusual for something to come back after this length of time. I'm sure people would recognise that, but I think it sets an awkward precedent for something to be bounced on us, and our comments, sort of referred to here, without opportunity really to consider and reconsider those in the light of anything that may have taken place within a large period of time. So I would move, firstly, as I said before, any discussion on this, that we defer this for a full consultation to take place involving the normal channels. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Is there a seconder for that motion to defer? Seconded by Councillor Hodges. So we will determine this motion first. I think it's pointless to have to come back to the motion and discuss the whole application. Any other members wish to comment before I go back to officers on the process about the proposal to defer the application? Perhaps officers would like to comment.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, well, it's important to note that the decision taken in 2014 still stands, and albeit this has been, there are very minor amendments to this scheme, those would normally have been dealt with through a minor amendment process and certainly not been brought back to committee. The only reason why this has come back is the issue around Section 106, and indeed it's important to note that were they amending the Section 106 in any way, shape or form, that could be dealt with through delegated powers as well, because the only reason it's come back is because it is no longer necessary. That reason it's no longer necessary is in accordance with council policy. So, for example, were this legal agreement to be signed tomorrow, the decision would be issued tomorrow in respect of the previous submission, and there would be no consultation process around it. It would be issued, it would run from 5 years from that date. So it is no different to that point as it stands now, other than the fact there will be no legal agreement attached to this consent. I completely understand Councillor Johnson's concerns. It is a long time after the original decision. This does unfortunately sometimes happen with applications subject to legal agreements, because discussions around legal agreements can take some time, and indeed discussions around sales of land associated with it can also take some time, and you often find that the legal agreement associated with a development won't be signed until a land sale or transaction has taken place. And I think in this particular case, it is not a case that they have held back and waited for the change in council policy. It is purely a fact that the negotiations over the sale of the property have taken a considerable period of time. So while I completely understand Councillor Johnson's view, to determine this now would not be contrary to any legislation. It would not be contrary to the planning legislation, for example, with regard to consultation. No one would be disenfranchised because the scheme is the same as the scheme that was and the decision that was taken in 2014, albeit that was 3 years ago. And indeed, there is one final issue which should not sway members, but it is important to note that there is a social housing grant allocated to this scheme, which does need to be in place, albeit that should not sway members in terms of making the decision one way or the other. So all I can say is the scheme itself, actually, as Councillor Johnson pointed out, is slightly better than the previous scheme. It projects to the rear slightly less far. That removal of that part of that staircase would have been a minor amendment. It wouldn't have required another planning application. So it really is only the issue of the Section 106 contribution, and as I say, that now complies with council policy.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. I've got to say I'm not happy about the 106 money. I was wondering if we could ask them for a donation of some kind too. But I will go with recommendations because we need these homes desperately. But I am upset about the 106 money. I'm moving that, the recommendation by the officers, but as I say, I am upset about the 106.
Seconded on the officer recommendation. If I deal with the deferment first, and then we'll come back. Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry I was late. I hear what Mark is saying about why there is this need. The reason he comes to this committee is because of a very subtle change, but he didn't say it would be wrong for us to defer for a month. And I'm asking, would there be some reason why we should not defer for a month? I mean, nothing's happened for 4 Perishan years, so I wouldn't have thought that delaying for a month would be a massive problem. But if there's some deadline that's going to be met by December 31, then perhaps we need to know that.
Marcus?
I don't understand there would be. What I would say is that obviously there's very little to be gained, given that in all other aspects this clearly the consent, if it had been issued in accordance with the original decision, would still be extant even if this hadn't been built or hadn't been commenced, let's say. So there's very little, if any comments are received. You know, I agree with consultation when it's important, and it is important, but it's not actually going to achieve a great deal in this regard because the decision was previously taken, and this council would be it would be very difficult to make a different decision than that previous decision in 2014. But I don't understand there would be anything which would fall over or would be seriously affected if it was deferred.
Thank you. I want to deal with the deferment issue, and then we'll come back to the main application if it's not deferred. Anyone else wish to comment on the motion in front of us, which is around deferring this for consultation period? And can I just also confirm, would a full consultation period mean it comes to January or to February's meeting? It'll be February's meeting. We'll be deferring it to. Councillor Johnson?
I just want to sort of return to some of the comments. I think that this is a matter of goodwill and transparency as much as it is of following planning legislation and requirements. This is something which, although it's officially a live application on the basis that the Section 106 was never signed, and has since fallen past the 5th of September date, which therefore means that around £35,000 that would have been originally earmarked for spend, so in the local area isn't there. That's not the point I'm making. The point, although there is an issue about cherry picking which rules and regulations we want to be looking at or not looking at, depending on the dates that we use. The point I'm making here is about goodwill and transparency, because frankly it's come out of the blue for myself and for others who assumed that this was long done and dusted, and I think it would be appropriate to have a consultation period under the normal circumstances, and this will come back in February. As I think as Councillor King said, this has been waiting in the wings for 4 or 5 years now. My comments in 2013 actually said that one of the concerns would be that the building would go to ruin. We've taken 4 or 5 years to reach this point, so I don't think that another 8 weeks or so is going to necessarily change an awful lot. But I think it would be a goodwill to hold a consultation in the meantime. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no one else wishing to speak on the deferment motion, all those in favour of deferring the motion and deferring the application's consideration for the consultation period? 3. All those against deferring? 13. That motion falls. Moving on to the planning application, we do have a motion to move off to recommendations. Anyone wish to comment on the application before we vote on the motion? Councillor Johnson.
Yes, and as I've already alluded, we seem to be cherry picking which bits we want to utilise or not utilise. So, so we're using the 2013 application, which was passed by this committee in 2014, applying retrospective rules from 2016 about the Section 106 because it wasn't completed in advance of that time at what is a loss to my community in the centre of Barry, because that money was earmarked for use there. Other monies have been brought in to replace that because that project didn't come in time. The concerns were raised at the time regarding the parking spaces. There are 5 undercroft spaces for 15 dwellings. We have since introduced new guidelines regarding parking. I'm not sure quite where those fall within those numbers. Obviously, this is a town centre area. We might assume that not all of the residents will have cars. You could also assume, we were told back in 2014 that, the offices there created a greater amount of traffic than the people who would be living there. Well, that may well have been true if we were going directly from one to the other when the Vale of Glamorgan Council used those offices, but that's not the case now, 5 years down the line from them last being used. We also had changes in the legislation in terms of pre-application support, planning and discussions. Obviously that didn't take place because this was part in 2013 before that requirement was introduced. So what I'm concerned with here is not necessarily the design of the building itself. I think that is an improvement, but I have concerns about the car parking, and I also have more broader concerns about this council cherry picking which rules and regulations it wants to apply retrospectively and which ones it doesn't. And I have no problem, in essence, with this building being brought back into use. It is a town centre building. I have one quick query, which is regarding the Section 106 and how that operates, where we have 100% affordable housing, but we also have a mixed usage because we have ground floor shopping area here. I did look at the 2016 cabinet agendas, and I couldn't find really sort of a discussion on how that was going to be used, because you could have an area which includes hypothetically 100% affordable housing, but also large shopping areas, for example, and they might try and argue on the basis of this that there is no Section 106 money that is required on that basis. So I would be interested in this precedent that this is setting. I would also be interested to have the updated figures regarding the housing need, etc. Obviously, the housing need is determined largely by welfare reform changes that come from Westminster, over which this council does not necessarily have a huge sway, but has to make allowances for that. So we have a large number of one-bed properties that are currently in development, within the central Barry area, and it would have been useful to have had a greater knowledge of how that would be impacting upon us. I hope that that the officers, pointing at their fingers at things means that they've got some answers to that, and I've missed it in the paperwork. But trying to establish which is the paperwork from 2013-14 and which is up-to-date information has been quite difficult. We have letters from local residents, but actually, in response to this, but those residents wrote those letters in 2013 and 2014. So although I have no substantial objection to this, given that the approval was given in 2014, and this is actually a better scheme than we had at the time, I am very concerned for the precedents that it sets. Thank you.
I do have Councillor Burnett to come in, but I'll let officers respond with those points you've raised.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, if I just pick up the issue, actually, it's useful to pick up because Councillor Wilkinson also raised the issue of the Section 106 and obviously concerns around the loss of that. The reason why the original policy change came in to not seek Section 1 contributions for solely affordable housing schemes for less than 25 units is that when you sought those contributions, you were essentially taking money out of the scheme, which had come from mainly two sources, either social housing grant, which the council allocates, or possibly Section 106 monies already, which the housing council has obviously put into the pot to bring the housing forward. So in doing so, you are lessening the effectiveness of the Section 106 pot for affordable housing, and also the effectiveness of the social housing grant. And it does affect the viability of social housing providers in terms of schemes. So it's a circular argument. You're taking money out of the pot to do something else perhaps, but unfortunately you're affecting their ability to build more social housing. Given the importance of social housing, the decision was taken by the council at that time that it wasn't going to request Section 106 contributions for those solely affordable housing schemes less than 25 less than 25 units. It's a very interesting point that Councillor Johnson makes, and a valid point, that if you had mixed uses in a building, then either it's not a solely social housing scheme, or how would you apply those principles when you have a situation like this? And what we would normally do is look at the floor space of the retail unit. For example, in this case, there's a retail unit at ground floor as well associated with this scheme, which we encouraged as a council and as a planning authority because of the benefit to Holton Road and to the appearance of the street scene in general, that you have a retail unit there. And we would look at the floor space that created and did that having regard to the supplementary planning guidance for Section 106 contributions. Did that floor space on its own right need a contribution? So you take the affordable housing, the solely affordable housing part out of the equation and say, okay, it's a floor space of X. Does that meet the terms of Section 106? Obviously, in this case, it doesn't, because it's a relatively small unit, or an average side unit, which wouldn't generate that need. If you were to have a much bigger unit, or I don't know, a mall or something with the mall with flats above, which did require that, then there is every likelihood that part of it might generate a need for Section 106, but the affordable housing, if it was less than 25 units and solely affordable housing, wouldn't generate that need. So that is how we'd apply that system, that particular that's how we'd apply Section 106 contributions to a development like that. In this case, the shop is not, or the retail unit or cafe is not of the size that would generate a need for contributions. Car parking, yes, it is an issue. Obviously, the car parking situation hasn't actually changed, albeit we are consulting on supplementary planning guidance for parking guidance, but that hasn't changed from the position it was in 2014. What was relevant then was what's called Manual for Streets, which is guidance from national government, and that remains relevant even with the parking guidelines, which we're currently consulting on through supplementary planning guidance. And in this particular case, as Councillor Johnson rightly picked up, it is a central location in a very sustainable part of town, where in some cases we have accepted schemes without any parking at all. Obviously 5 parking spaces is less than would be the normal requirement, but given where it is, we would not be looking to turn this application down, as we weren't in 2014 for the parking provision that is proposed. I'm just checking back. Have I covered all the questions? And the housing, sorry, yes, and the housing need. Now, the housing need is dealt with in the report at page. And did you want to go into this in more detail, Vicky?
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Johnson, you are right that the housing need surveys are updated more regularly than this. So the latest one that we rely on, and it is referred to in the Kyleon Road report, is the 2015 local housing market assessment. So that would have been after the previous decision. There was a change in methodology between the 2 local housing market assessments. So the identified need actually dropped overall down to 559 units, I think, annually required across the Vale. Of course, as we are all familiar with, we don't build anything like that number of affordable housing units every year. So even with the best will in the world, if we granted every single house that came forward in front of us, we still wouldn't be meeting our identified housing need, either from the latest local housing market assessment or the one previously. So in other words, we have a very high level of need for affordable housing. It is still very high in Barry. It's one of the highest areas of need alongside Penarth. And so the sort of justification argument for the need for affordable housing is still very much relevant and hasn't changed between the 2 applications. Not applications, the dates, sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Burnett.
Thank you. totally supportive of the provision of additional affordable housing, and totally supportive of any initiative which will bring activity and life to that end of Halton Road. I suppose my only concern is that, I mean, this is a building that's provided a challenge for a number of years, and so when the application first came in, it was an opportunity to bring that back into life. It has been mentioned things have changed since then, and obviously with the post office next to it becoming vacant, also potentially vacancy in Provincial House just round the corner, where the YMCA shop is, etc. I can't help thinking that there is huge potential in that area for regeneration, and it's more a plea that if we're looking at the next stage of Welsh Government regeneration and there are opportunities, I would hope that an approval on this site wouldn't blight any future plans, and we would continue to be talking to the RSL so that if things need to move, they can do for the sake of that area of Halton Road. So, you know, when this is all put in, there were no other opportunities on the table. But I said, I wouldn't like this to stop other regeneration at that end of Halton Road happening. But as I said, on the whole, in terms of activity in the town centre and affordable housing, then, you know, it would have my support.
Marcus?
Yeah, you know, I can assure the committee and the council as a whole that absolutely not. Those sites are very much key and at the forefront of our minds in terms of future funding from Welsh Government and also other funding sources. You know, members will be aware that there is a town centre loan system which we currently operate on behalf of Welsh Government, where unfortunately one property that we were hoping would use about £1 million of loan has fallen through, but we are hoping that maybe that may open up other opportunities for that money, and we are seeking additional funds from Welsh Government to expand that town centre loan scheme, which has been very successful in delivering regeneration around the whole of the town. But on top of that, obviously, we have the new Welsh Government's scheme called Targeted Regeneration Investment, and we are working with Welsh Government at the moment. We have the Barry Gateway scheme, which we call it, which is not limited to the sites at the very end of Halton Road and Broad Street. It actually can encompass a number of sites, and if we need to find funding to bring forward regeneration proposals around this area, including buildings like the post office and you know, the other former council building at the top, they will be within that scheme, and they will have access to funding, or we will attempt to get access to funding through the bidding process. So I can assure councillors of that.
Thank you. Councillor Hodges.
Just briefly, it's condition 9 on page 72. I note obviously that within the plan there is the switch to retail at the ground floor there, and it says either A1, which is straight retail, or A3, which is cafe type provision. But it's got there that no cooking facility should be installed at the premises other than those used for the heating of pre-packaged food. I was wondering, what's the reason for that, and also would that curtail the possibilities of the actual cafe type business if and when it happens?
That's a very valid point, Councillor Hodges. The reason it's in is that when this application came in, and obviously it's being considered again now, the applicants have not yet secured a proposed occupier. So that condition is there and would make it quite difficult for a cafe or another restaurant to go in there. However, we have put it there to ensure that if it was a restaurant or cafe that went in there, they would have to apply to vary or remove that condition, providing details of an extraction system which was acceptable to the council. And obviously, because they don't yet have an occupier, they can't provide those details now, and it would be pointless them putting those details in as in a generic way. the days of a generic extractor system are long gone. Some systems are very complicated, dependent on what type of operator is in there. So it is there really to provide us with a mechanism that we can revert it.
Would that apply then to condition 8 with the times as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Because it wouldn't be a very exciting restaurant closing at 6:30 in the evening.
So it just gives us control, and if needs be, we can amend those conditions subject to consultation with colleagues in shared regulatory services and licensing.
If there are no other comments, I'll move to a vote on this. We have a motion to go with officer recommendations. All those in favour, please. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving on to our next planning application, 2017/00727/RES, Reserve Matters application, land at Killian Road, Dinas Powys. Vicky.
Thank you, Chair. As the report sets out, this is an application for approval of reserved matters relating to a previous approval of an outline consent for 70 dwellings on land at Killian Road in Dinas Powys. This is a land that is allocated for residential development in the local development plan and has already been granted in outline. The matters before us now then are to consider access, drainage, public open space, play areas, the layout of the housing, the design of the housing. Those are the matters that we are primarily looking at. Sorry, I'll get the plans up for you on the screen. You can see the layout plan and some examples of the housing that's proposed to be constructed. They're they're two-storey houses of relatively traditional pitched roof design. A range of different house types. There's 40% affordable housing being provided in accordance with the Section 106 and the outline consent. A range of 1 and 2 bed flats, 2, 3 and 4 bed houses across the site, with an element of public open space being provided on the site as well. We have had a number of objections that are set out in the report. Quite a large number of those objections, including some of the ones from Dinas Powys Community Council, relate to what I would say is the principle of the use of the site for residential use. So a lot of concerns about traffic impacts and access. Those have been dealt with under the outline consent, and that the fact that that was approved, we are not able to revisit those issues. So we need to focus on the issues at hand with this reserved matters application, largely being design, layout, impact of the detailed design elements that are in front of us now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vicky. We have a number of speakers, public speakers. I believe our first one is Mr. Rod Harrod. If you want to take your seat just up there, sir. In order to balance the debate, we'll keep you to time limits. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. When you're ready to start, just remind you, we can ask clarification questions, so if you want to throw in an acronym and move on, we can always come back to that. Okay, thank you. When you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I've got a rhetorical question. Why doesn't this application walk the talk, or even cycle it? Condition 5 of the reserved matters requires compliance with the transport assessment. And I recognise what's just been said. In June 2015, the updated assessment says the impact of the extra traffic that's generated must be mitigated by a travel plan which would be complemented by measures to enhance both pedestrian movement and the site's connectivity to Eastbrook Railway Station. This was repeated in the officer's report in the January 16 Planning Committee, at which outline planning was granted, provided all of 14 conditions were met. In the same report, the Highways Department said there was no feasible layout improvement the developer could do at the Cardiff Road junction. Improvements the LDP has since deemed essential for all new developments. Surely that shouldn't happen until mitigating measures are in place, namely a bypass. Officers considered the submission of a travel plan and implementation of alternative public and other sustainable modes of transport appropriate. But the only suggestion made in the application is to upgrade a pedestrian link from the end of Killeen Road to the footbridge at Eastbrook Railway Station. But there's no footpath from the new estate to Killeen Road. Without a new link on the other side of the walk to Eastbrook Rail Station, it's up to half a mile. Would you have leave your car in the garage, come rain, wind or snow, or to walk half a mile to the station with only 20 park and ride spaces? Then wait while 3 trains pass through packed from stations further down the line? The transport assessment proposed traffic calming measures at the site entrance, the Killeen Road, Cricket Court Junction and along Killeen Road, yet they're not included in the applicant's submission, and so it's not compliant with condition 5.
Thank you very much, sir. Any members have any questions of clarification for Mr. Harrod? Councillor Driscoll. If you turn your microphone off, sir.
Don't know nothing. Thanks, Rod. You suggesting then that despite it didn't comply with the LDP, which suggests that any development has to adding traffic to that main highway, in this case the A405, that they have no objections to the development. The Transport Department has no objections. Is that what you're suggesting?
That's correct.
Okay, there are no other questions or clarifications. Thank you very much. Our next public speaker against is Mr. Roger Pattington. I hope I've said your surname correctly, sir. When you're ready to speak, press your microphone on. You'll have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Condition 6 requires a detailed travel plan. At the outline planning stage, it was accepted that this development would adversely impact on the local highways and in particular the Merch Road, Cardiff Road junction. The capacity of local roads cannot be increased to mitigate the impact of the extra traffic. This particularly applies to the same junction because, despite proposals to improve it, including in the LDP, the Highway Authority now considers that its geometry prevents any improvement. A robust travel plan which would reduce the extra vehicles from the development was therefore called for. So, the submitted travel plan must demonstrate that it would significantly reduce the extra traffic. But it does not do this. It targets a reduction in the proportion of residents driving to and from work from 70% to 60% in 5 years. Even if it worked, it would mean a feeble reduction of only around 10 fewer drivers on the roads. It would rely on soft persuasion through leaflets and the like. But without any incentive to change or penalty for not changing, it cannot be relied on to achieve even this objective. The unreliability of such a plan is evidenced by the travel plan for the health centre at the top of Merch Crescent, which was a condition of its approval. This has not resulted in a reduction in the traffic. Like many of the documents produced by applicants to persuade the council that the predicted adverse impacts of their development will somehow not materialise, this travel plan is no exception. It will not mitigate the predicted adverse impact on traffic congestion at the Cardiff Road junction. Only a bypass will do that. The submitted travel plan is considered extremely weak and not fit for purpose. It is therefore not compliant with condition 6. Shouldn't this development be deferred until the bypass is in place?
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Any members wish to ask any questions of clarification on what's been said? Councillor Driscoll.
Hello, Roger. Can you explain why the junction at Merch Road traffic lights cannot be improved?
Yes, the officers in their report to the January 16 Planning Committee meeting said that this transport assessment was followed up by a further briefing note to explore the impact of vehicular traffic generated by the proposed development on the performance of the Cardiff Road, Merch Road signal control junction. This indicates that there is little by way of geometric improvement that could be implemented at the signal junction that would improve its operational performance. So they say you can't improve it.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. I'll call the next speaker against Mr. Richard Grigg. Once again, sir, you'll have 2 minutes when you're ready.
First of all, I'm not here to object to more houses being built in Dinas Powys in the future. There needs to be new houses, including affordable and social housing, so that local people can afford to remain in the village. What I'm objecting to is new houses being built without improvement to the current infrastructure. Anyone travelling along the Cardiff Road can see that the volume of traffic in the village is huge and a massive problem, and there are very long queues and delays during rush hour. There are several junctions in the village that are already over capacity: Castle Drive Merch Road, Cardiff Road, and the Mary Harrier Junction. The LDP makes reference to these junctions and indicates they are inadequate. There is clearly an identified need to improve the capacity of these junctions. However, the Vale have never explained how this is possible. To build an additional 70 houses is going to make a bad situation worse. There's also an application for 215 houses on the Lower St Cyrus site. That's almost 300 additional houses. If each property has 2 cars, that will be an extra 600 cars on the road. Travelling back and forth every day, that will be an extra 1,200 car trips. And I think that's a conservative estimate. If these applicants are granted, it would lead to gridlock in the village. These cars are all going to have to go through the already overcapacity junctions. There's nowhere else for them to go. These should be put on hold until there are improvements to infrastructure. There's currently an investigation being undertaken on how to improve the traffic flow. Part of that investigation is looking at the possibility of building a bypass together with multimodal solutions. We are told that the bypass is a priority for this administration. Surely there should be no decision to build new houses until we've had a decision on the bypass. I therefore ask that you to consider deferring this decision until after the investigation is completed. Diolch.
Thank you. Any member have any questions or clarification from what's been just said? In which case, thank you very much, Mr. Grigg. Now call forward Councillor Robertson. If you want to take one of these seats here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You'll have 3 minutes when you're ready.
Okay, I'd like to refer committee and the officers to condition 9 of the original planning application, which is the construction traffic management plan. This condition was put forward by the Council's Highway Authority, and its requirement which is included in the officer's report to the January 2016 Planning Committee meeting. It states clearly that construction vehicles should not be allowed to travel to or from the site, and I quote, for half an hour either side of school starting and finishing times. Now, there's a slight problem here insofar as the junior school and the infant school in the Merch have different school hours, so I'd like to see there be a correlation between those to mitigate that. In addition, there are students who are going to St Cyrus School who tend to gather outside the shops in the parade on Castle Drive. I know their school isn't actually on the route, but maybe that'll be covered by the second condition, or second part of the condition, which states that construction vehicles must not enter or leave the site at peak rush hours. These times, peak rush hours, I hope would be derived from actual traffic surveys. But nowhere in the submitted plan, the new submitted plan, do the developers mention these requirements, and far less do they detail the times involved which are necessary for this traffic management plan to be workable. They've admitted these commitments entirely and ignored them. I feel not only should these commitments be put into writing in a new submission, but some form of penalty clause added should the developer ignore any of these commitments. As this plan fails to specify the no-go times, it is therefore not compliant with condition 9, and I think should be turned down. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Before you disappear, are there any members wishing to ask any clarification on what's just been said? Councillor Driscoll.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Is there a problem with the traffic management, i.e. the speed and the traffic along that road leading to the site?
Yes, there's certainly an issue. I think in the application it states that there'll be a 20-mile-an-hour limit in the new development, and we have a 20-mile-an-hour limit at the Camps Corner junction, which is the junction between Merch Road and Castle Drive. However, between that junction and between the new development, the speed limit will remain at 30 miles an hour, as far as I understand. I think this is totally unsatisfactory. I think really that if you're going to have those two 20-mile-an-hour zones, then they should be connected by a further 20-mile-an-hour zone, which should go along Castle Drive. In fact, probably a 20-mile-an-hour zone for the whole of Valley View would be ideal.
Thank you. If there are no other members' questions, thank you very much, Councillor Robertson. Any officers want to come back on some of the points you were asked about? Vicky.
I am slightly confused by the councillor's comments in regard to the condition because it's not the same wording as what we have on our system. So as far as I'm concerned, condition 9 requires those details to be submitted for approval at outline. So I'm not quite sure where that wording has come from, but obviously the outline consent does require those details to be submitted and to be agreed, and that will be done in consultation with our highway authority, who will decide whether or not the construction traffic management plan is acceptable in terms of highway safety. Obviously having regard to any sort of conflict that there may be, having regard to schools, for example, on the busy junctions and so on. I would go back to my earlier comment, really. The comments that have been made for the most part by the speakers this evening all relate to the principle of allowing more housing and the traffic impacts associated with that, and all of those issues were assessed and considered under the outline consent and should not be reopened and revisited now as part of the reserved matters consent. So I really don't want to go into any sort of strong debate about those issues because they're not relevant to the application that's in front of us.
One final issue. I know the travel plan was mentioned, and I think it's important to note that the travel plan is part of a submission, the discharge of condition. I note they've copied it into the details submitted with this reserved matters, but it is a separate condition, one which has only recently been submitted to the council and will be considered by in conjunction with highways colleagues and other. So that is not part of this consideration. It will be part of the discharge of condition of the outline consent.
I don't want to get onto a full debate now because we've still got to hear from our other speaker, but if there's any clarification on what Marcus has just said, I'll allow it. But for the time being, if I ask Mr. Pete Sully to step forward, who is applicant or the representative speaking in favour, to balance the debate, you have 6 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. My name is Pete Sully, Associate Director at Asbury Planning Consultants for Kia Living for this scheme. Firstly, Kia Living would like to state that this is their first development site in Wales and is programmed to be delivered in 2018, bringing a much-needed new, high-quality volume housing and affordable housing developer to Wales. They are therefore very keen to deliver a high-quality scheme in a timely manner. The project will also be run by Kia's Cardiff office. I don't propose to take up the full 6 minutes, as the Officers Committee report comprehensively addresses the most pertinent issues, but I just wanted to highlight a few points and response to some of the objections just raised, which the officers have also just responded to. Firstly, and as set out in the officer presentation, the site benefits from an allocation for a residential development for 70 homes in the very recently adopted LDP. Outline planning permission for 70 homes was granted in May this year. The application before members tonight seeks reserved matters consent for 70 homes. Therefore, it is clearly within the scope of the LDP allocation and the outline planning permission. The principle of development is therefore well established through the LDP and the extant outline planning permission. The development will comprise a mix of 6 one-bed flats, 5 two-bed flats, 23 two-bed homes, 13 three-bed homes, and 23 four-bed homes. The proposed scheme therefore delivers 70 much-needed starter and family homes, including 28 or a policy-compliant 40% affordable homes. And there was a discussion on affordable housing need in a scheme that members have just discussed on Haydock House earlier. The layout has taken on board comments received in the outline application process, when the layout was in illustrative form only and comments raised through the pre-application process. The layout has been further revised during the course of the application for reserved matters to further respond to officers' comments. The officers' report clearly sets this out and confirms that the proposed scheme is acceptable in terms of TAN 12 and the LDP design-related policies, subject to some standard conditions. There have been a number of objections on traffic generation which officers have responded to, but the officers' report clearly states that the quantum of traffic generated by this scheme was accepted at the outline stage and is therefore not a matter of consideration this afternoon. That said, a travel plan has been produced in response to a condition on the outline permission which has been discussed, and officers are currently considering that as part of a separate process under those outline conditions. Of course, in order to progress the development, that travel plan condition needs to be satisfactorily discharged by the council, but this is a separate process and therefore does not form part of this RM application. The same applies for the construction traffic management plan, which is also subject to a condition on the outline which is with officers at the moment. In terms of the cycle route, as outlined in the officers' report, this is a matter that was not requested by officers at the time of the outline application. Notwithstanding, the applicant has revised the layout accordingly in this scheme so that sufficient space is made available along the site's northwestern boundary adjacent to the railway line to facilitate this cycle link. This can also subsequently aid pedestrian access to Eastbrook Railway Station when the cycle link is progressed. Initial comments raised by the Council's highway officers have been fully addressed within the revised layout, so the highways officers raised no objections, subject to the imposition of some standard conditions which have been rationalised for planning purposes by the case officer, as set out in the committee report. In terms of amenity, separation distances between the proposed and the existing dwellings meet the guidelines set out in the Council's own amenity standards, SPG. The proposed scheme fully complies with the requirements of the Section 106 agreement that was secured as part of the outline application. 40% affordable housing is provided in a mix of tenure that has been agreed by officers. 3,900 square metres of public open space and 2 local areas of play are proposed. £260,000 will be paid for education contribution. £140,000 for improvements to sustainable transport, which could be used for the cycle link, and £70,000 for community facilities. This equates to nearly £500,000 of financial contributions, policy compliant 40% affordable housing, and POS. No objections have been received from any technical consultees subject to conditions imposed, and, as concluded in the officer's report, officers have recommended approval. We therefore respectfully request that members approve the application in line with the officer's recommendation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Sully. Any members wish to ask any clarifying points? Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, you alluded to the traffic management scheme during the course of construction. Obviously, this is a separate matter, but to give the confidence to the previous speakers, perhaps you could fully confirm to me that you understand the obligations required to meet the construction traffic mitigation measures during the course of construction.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. I noted that there may be some discrepancies in terms of times for the construction traffic management plan. As mentioned earlier, that is with council officers at the moment as part of the discharging conditions. We can liaise with officers to make sure that all matters are addressed adequately to ensure there's no inconsistencies there and to minimise any disruption for construction traffic.
If I could remind members to move the microphones nearer to them when they're going to speak, so that those online can see how open and transparent we're being. Any other councillors wish to clarify points? Councillor Driscoll.
Hello, Mr. Sully. Thanks for giving us that speech. I'm going to ask you about basically the construction management proposals. Would you consider going the other direction, across the field to Redlands Road or to Sully Road, hence alleviating the issue of passing 2 schools?
That's not clarifying a point of detail in what he's been talking about. We can deal with that in the debate. Any other points of clarification?
No.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's simply information. There are a number of social housing or low-cost housings and so on units planned. Exactly where within the I can't see on the plan itself, and I can't see from here on there where exactly they are planned to be sited.
So the distribution of the social housing units within the site?
They're mostly towards the west, in one section along the west. In terms of 40% affordable housing, it's not easy to separating out into many clusters, it results in some management concerns. It's not, I think officers have stated that's not their preferred state, but they find that acceptable, so it's mostly towards the west of the site.
Can I come back?
Yeah, briefly.
Yeah,
and then I've got Councillor
just
Johnson.
briefly. I mean, I'm a little concerned that there seems to be some sort that I'd prefer to see social housing integrated across the site rather than being in some way ghettoised in one corner.
We can bring that in the debate, certainly. Councillor Johnson.
Just checking just checking geographically. You talk about the affordable sites being in the western part, or the affordable housing being in the western part of the site. Is that the site that's closest to the floodplain? Just checking my geography of the area.
It's the southwest. I will make sure to clarify that. The floodplain is on the northwestern side, but the flood zone C2 is totally out of the development area. And in terms of, I'm not sure if I can comment on the second councillor's comment about ghettoisation or.
I think that's a policy question. No, thank you for clarifying your comments earlier. We can debate that. I know where he was going with that. If you step down, please. That's great. Thank you very much. Officers wish to comment on any policy issues before opening the debate? We're bringing up a more clearer plan on.
Unfortunately,
Marcus,
the systems don't link in the chamber, so we can't put. I have the plans up on my computer, but Vicky has to try and get them up on hers. Just for clarification, I'll try and explain it. The social housing is shown is the block of. I don't know if you can actually see the circles on there, but the central block of housing.
That one there?
Yeah, from there down, that's affordable housing. Round to, yeah, and those there are affordable housing.
Did everyone see the brief laser pointer?
Unfortunately,
it's those there, it's those there, and it's those there. Okay.
What I would say to you as we do obtain 40% affordable housing on housing sites, that it becomes much more difficult to actually spread them into specific. So you do tend to get rows of these properties. In the past, we've accepted pockets of 10 and 15 properties in certain elements. The housing associations themselves do ask for the properties, a number of properties, to be together because of maintenance issues and looking after the properties going forward. So it's meeting that. It's trying to get that obviously that balance of not achieving, not seeing all the affordable housing in one spot. I think in this particular case, we would say that the housing, albeit it is to the west, is actually spread out in a linear fashion, and it is intermixed. There are market dwellings backing onto a lot of those properties, and indeed market dwellings alongside some of those properties. So your officers have tried quite hard to get it to this point, but we don't feel we could push it any further.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I was just looking for clarification on the sort of the discussions of northwest, southwest, etc., and the where the floodplain that is not quite on this area actually exists. Because it's obviously it's a slightly different angle to the one in which I normally see this, as I normally see it while passing this field while passing through it on a train. So I'm just trying to clarify.
You're not on a
where they are.
helicopter when you're going over the site. No, okay. Marcus or Vicky?
Unfortunately, because the plan would is not this application, this application wouldn't have the floodplain detail on it because it's the original outline application would have that on. I don't think there is a plan in this one which shows that. I can try and call up, this is quite a slow, laborious process, I'm afraid. I can try and call up what we call our QGIS system, which will have the floodplain on it. Unfortunately, because I'm working off Wi-Fi in this room, it is very, very slow. So if I'm talking and I sound like I'm one of these the cricket commentators talking about all sorts of things, that's because I'm trying to get the QGIS to start.
If we move on to other points, and we'll come back when we can physically get the plan. I think that would be the best way of clarifying it rather than guessing. at something like that. Any other members wish to comment? This way no one else does and we have to wait for it to all load up. Oh, yeah. And I moved you to where you could be seen.
No, it's all right, yeah.
Councillor Williams first, then Councillor.
Yeah, just a curious question. I know we've had on the last application about the S106. I'm just curious as to whether that's set precedence for this, as far as can the developer ask for a reduction?
Vicky?
No, this site is not an 100% affordable housing scheme, so it's a normal market housing led scheme with the normal policy compliant 40% for affordable housing here. So there's no reduction in that sense for Section 106 contributions. With any scheme, we have to balance things. So if viability starts to kick in and starts to become a problem, we need to have a look at the full package of measures, but that's not the case on this site.
Thank you. I had Councillor Driscoll first, and I'll come to Councillor Johnson. Councillor Driscoll.
Marcus, the late introduction of the cycle path on parallel to the railway line, which goes from nowhere to nowhere. What I was going to suggest to the developers was that maybe they could continue that to where hopefully it will go, which is the Redlands Road. But before they did that, they could maybe run a hardcore track across the field to Redlands Road, which would alleviate the construction traffic going through the rest of the estate and past two junior schools.
Yeah, it's too late to revisit those issues which should have been dealt with outlined. So any proposals like that for to secure a sort of off-site particular traffic route should have been secured at outline if we'd felt it was necessary. Obviously, we didn't. In terms of this cycleway that's been referred to, that's a council aspiration that's come forward from our transportation section. It's not the developer proposing it. What we've said is that the outline consent secured the normal contributions for sustainable transport. That gets spent in accordance with all the normal protocols, so local ward member consultation, cabinet member consultation and so on. If at that time when that contribution comes to us that it's deemed that that's the most appropriate use of the money to be used to provide a cycleway, footway or any other pedestrian, cycle, public transport connections, that's where it'll be used. So it's at the council's discretion to make those decisions in due course. It's not to revisit that now through this reserved matters application.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Chair. I've got a couple of different sort of questions to ask while Marcus is dealing with the Wi-Fi and the systems here. I'm so glad that we've moved to a paperless council. It clearly works very, very well in these important meetings. So my first question really is actually about it's about some of the responses that we've had on consultation here, particularly if I find the right page regarding NRW and Network Rail. Now NRW, it seems to be that they don't have any particular concerns, but we've all been discussing NRW in quite a great detail in recent times. So I was just wondering sort of what work the council may or may not have done regarding flooding, etc., in this area, and whether we have anything which can corroborate or not the findings of NRW. We have there are a number of applications in recent time where I think we've been second guessing NRW's capacity on these issues. So I would be interested if we have any further information on that. And also the comments from Network Rail and how they work in practice, what this actually means for the scheme. I do have some more questions to come back on, sort of on the sustainable transport, etc. But if we can deal with those first, then it'd be great rather than run into me asking a dozen questions and then only getting 6 of them answered fully. Thanks.
Thank you.
Vicky.
Thank you, Chair. We do have the plan here. We can't bring it up on the screen, but if you want to have a look at it, you can. But if I can indicate it, the flooding area is this side of the site. On this periphery, it barely touches the edge of the site, which was why firstly it was allocated as an LDP allocation for housing, and it was why it was granted outline consent. all they needed to do on the reserve matters application was to make sure that they didn't put any vulnerable development in that area, which they wouldn't have been doing anyway, given its proximity there to the flooding and to the edge of the site. So flooding is not an issue. That's why NRW haven't objected on flooding grounds, because none of the vulnerable development is in an area that's prone to flooding.
Councillor King.
Sorry, did you want me to come back on the network rail issue? Sorry, just to say they're largely issues for the construction phase of the development, to make sure there's no interference with network rails provisions, and obviously the layout of the development is such that it's set away from the railway, so it's not going to affect or interfere with network rails, operations there. So.
One quick point, which I suppose is related to that and Natural Resources Wales comments. There remains a condition dealing with drainage on the outline consent, and that would remain to be discharged by the applicants. So it is the very confusing nature of having these reserve matters applications, but the outline application has a condition on it dealing with drainage and land drainage, and you'll note, I think if it's on page 84, the Council's Highways and Engineering Section Drainage team were consulted and have advised that with regard to this reserve matters application, there is insufficient information to discharge drainage details. So they would have to do that as part of the process of discharging the conditions of the outline consent. So there are a set of conditions on that outline consent, such as the construction management plan, such as the travel plan, which would need to be discharged separately. The only condition or the only details I'm aware of that have come in are the travel plan. The travel plan condition is the only one that's been submitted so far, bar these reserve matters.
My apologies, Councillor Johnson. You asked your questions in twos to get them answered, and I ignored the second one. Councillor King now, please.
Thank you, Chair. In the previous administration, I became the Cabinet member responsible for highways, and I have quite a lot of sympathy with the issues that have been raised by some of the earlier speakers this evening. I commissioned I think it was the WellTag Stage 1 report that was starting to look at the issues of transport in and through Dinas Powys. I now know that my successor has commissioned a WellTag 2, and that is underway. Because I'm no longer in that privileged position, I don't know when that may be completed. But I suppose my question is, do we know if and when this development may be completed, and if and when that report and its outcomes may be made known? Because whilst we can't make major changes now, I would like to think that we are moving toward and thinking seriously about how we address the whole transport issue through Dinas Powys. At least at the same speed as we're exacerbating it.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor, the WellTag Stage 2 is due to report, I think, early in next year. I believe there was a report to scrutiny around that recently. Obviously, Highways colleagues are progressing that separately to this. I appreciate where you're coming from. Unfortunately, because we have the outline consent, we can't stop. We can't not determine this because of to wait for the WellTag study. But rest assured that is happening separately, with Highways colleagues undertaking that and pushing that forward.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to sort of follow on almost from the point being made there, which is about integration of different council policies within this here. So, for example, just checking how this the proposals here, including the active travel, the transport road safety sections, comments on the active travel cycle network, etc., how that fits in with our local transport plan, which runs from 2515 to 2030, and of course doesn't include a Dinas Powys bypass, but also sort of how this is intended, or if it is intended, to in any way fit in alongside the moving forward multimodal discussion around that WellTag 2 process. Is there a way, for example, of, I think one of the speakers questioned whether it was possible to to integrate this within that broader process in any way, shape or form, whether there's a non-occupation until that stage, at least stage 2, etc., has been completed, and we know where this stands within that, or anything similar that may affect that. I can see the officers smiling, because I can guess what their response to that sort of suggestion is likely to be. But it's a serious one, because people in Dinas Powys are concerned. Obviously, this was passed under the by the different planning committee to this one, but the local development plan was passed by the new Conservative administration when it took over earlier this year. But I think we'd be interested to know how or what work has been done, moving forward from the initial outline acceptance forward into this level of detail as to how this integrates with the wider council policy. Because although I suspect it would be difficult to prevent this on any of this basis and how the principle has been established, I think I'd be interested to know how the council works on a cross-cutting basis to ensure that all of these different needs are being met at the same time and not on an individual basis. Thank you.
Marcus.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Johnson. You made a very valid point there. I was smiling not because of the question. I was smiling because I think it's a very good idea. But unfortunately, we are hamstrung in certain areas by the legislation and the way in which it requires us to produce documents at differing stages. I mean, and by that I mean the council's policy on land development is obviously contained within the local development plan, which has been in a number of years of work until it got adopted earlier this year. That process doesn't stop now. That process continues. There's an annual monitoring review which will take place next year. And that monitoring review will take account of the very issues you're talking about, such as travel requirements, travel plan requirements, any new guidance that comes out of Welsh Government in respect of multimodal transport. But unfortunately, with all of the LDP is a moment in time, and we have to make decisions in accordance with that moment in time for the time being until it becomes a living document. Welsh Government would tell you it is a living document because it has an annual monitoring plan, and the annual monitoring review should pick up large changes, the type of changes you're talking about. If it gives you some comfort, what I would say to you in terms of the way the council works and its cross-cutting processes, the issue of the cycleway footpath is actually probably a very good example of that, because at the time of the original outline determination, that wasn't on the radar of the council as being needed or being considered. And well, when this reserve matters application came in, colleagues in the highway development team raised this as an issue, and Vicky can correct me if I'm wrong, but I assume this is colleagues in the part of the highways development team which are dealing with public transport and footpaths and bridleways. So it is part of the sustainable transport arm of the highways development team which picked this up. So as part of ongoing discussions about possible future developments around the metro and other developments through sustainable transport, they have picked this up and said this is would be a useful addition. So while we can't guarantee that every single piece of changing legislation and guidance automatically makes its way into the decision-making process, we do try our hardest through the consultation process in the planning system to pick up all relevant information and include it within the decision-making process. Unfortunately, I come back to the position we are legally under the planning system, where we are hamstrung slightly and we can't go beyond certain parameters. But we do hope to work with developers to come forward with schemes where they accept suggestions. In this particular case, I think it's a very good example that the developer could have just said no, but they have agreed to make land available for this particular part, this particular footpath and bridleway. They didn't necessarily have to do that, but because the outline consent didn't require it, but they have done so. So if I can give you some comfort, we do try and work with all our colleagues in the various departments, consulting them and taking on board their comments, but most certainly our highways development team work very closely with us in terms of taking developments forward and in terms of taking account of sustainable transport needs, the metro, for example, as part of the Cardiff City region, and other requirements that are going to be coming on stream as we move forward.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wish to comment? In which case I move officer recommendations. Seconded. All those in favour of officer recommendations, please. All those against? Any abstentions? One abstention. That passes. Thank you. Moving on to our third planning application, 2017/0102/FUL, Homemade Wales, 5 Island Road, Barry. Vicky, I believe you'll speak on this.
Sorry, Chair, I was just trying to get the plans up on the screen, but the plans don't actually show a lot, and I'm sure they're in the report anyway. So we'll deal with the application, if members have got the paperwork in front of you. This is an application to change the use of the existing property on Island Road in Barry from an existing A1 retail unit into a D2 Magicians Theatre. It's been called into planning committee by Councillor Nick Hodges because he's concerned about the loss of a pro-tourism opportunity for Barry, that Barry Town Council had no issues with the application, and that it's supported by high street traders who have concerns that the small shop would otherwise be uneconomic. You will see from the officer's report the recommendation is for refusal. Members may recall we considered not dissimilar proposal for a shop unit in Cadoxton a month or two ago. Similar policies apply here. We have LDP policies that protect existing retail uses within town and district centres. In this particular case, the premises has only recently been vacated from its previous shop use, and no marketing exercise has been undertaken to establish whether or not there is another alternative retail use that could come forward for the premises. The use that has been proposed is for a D2 use, which is described as a magician's theatre. The extra information that we've obtained from the applicant is that that would operate on the basis of individual performances being carried out at the venue approximately 3 or 4 times a month, and that the opening hours would be anything operating between 8 o'clock in the morning and 11 p.m. at night, that the theatre would have a capacity for around 20 people. The plans are shown on page 112 of the report. And the rest of the time the unit would be used as a sort of practicing space for the magicians. It's not intended, for example, to be used as a shop, to be open during the daytime to sell associated ancillary items, that sort of thing. Our concerns are that that type of use would create a dead frontage in the retail area. It would lose an existing shop. It wouldn't add to the vitality and attractiveness of the centre. In fact, it would detract from it because it would, to all intents and purposes, for the majority of the time, be a dead use, not open to the public, and not attracting visitors or shoppers to the area. Obviously, the report sets out in some detail those policy considerations and finally concludes with a reason for refusal being the loss of the A1 use without appropriate justification in terms of marketing or the viability of the use. This would be an unacceptable impact on the vitality and the retail function of the Broad Street High Street District Retail Centre, contrary to the LDP policies listed there.
Thank you, Vicky. We have no public speakers registered to speak against the... If you let me finish, sir, please. We have no public speakers registered to speak against the application. We have a number of Vale of Glamorgan Council elected members who wish to speak. They're going to be speaking next, and then you'll have your chance to speak in favour. So first of all, call forward Councillor Hampton to one of these seats here. When you're ready, Councillor Hampton, you'll have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As one of the local ward members, I am grateful for the opportunity to address the Planning Committee, as I believe this is a unique opportunity and should be examined very carefully. Members will note that the 3 elected members, all present today, held back on making any comments, as we fully intended to be here today to speak to this meeting, and it would have been unwise for us to express our opinions publicly beforehand. The application before us, in the name of Homemade 5 Island Road, is actually going to be called The Small Space, catering for around 16 people to be entertained in the Magician's Theatre. To start off, 4 times a month. Could be higher, could be lower, depending on circumstances. The previous craft shop, Homemade, has relocated to 8 High Street. I noticed earlier in the agenda this evening that number 28 High Street has been allowed change of use from A1 to a physiotherapy practice on delegated authority, and this application includes a rear extension. There's no mention of any parking provision in this approval. Similarly, we're all acquainted with the United Reformed Church, 100 yards away, which has had permission from an inspector for 22 residential units and up to 144 office staff with a 1 single parking space being provided. Fortunately, regarding this number 5 Island Road, I noticed that the Highways Department have recognised the proposed use as ancillary to what is already happening in this street, and they have no objections whatsoever, and neither have any of the neighbours. In fact, the traders in the area are very happy about the proposal. Now let's look at this sensibly. Looking at the plans, there are no offending windows at side or rear elevations, and the ground floor is to be used as a performance area. I quite understand our officer's concerns about the loss of a retail unit, but the Wales Assembly Government guidance states that local authorities should consider how non-A1 use consents can reduce empty shop levels. We have a number of these already in Halton Road, at least 4 with the, well, I know that 10 of us is closing shortly, and we have a derelict Windsor pub there as well. Would members please note that Technical Advice Note 4 states changes of use should be assessed against the development plan policies and on their contribution to diversification of the retail and commercial centre.
Thank you, Councillor Hampton. That's the 3 minutes time up, I'm afraid.
All I can say is I wish that you'll help me to put some magic into Island Road.
So you didn't quite get to the punchline before the 3 minutes, but that's fine. If you wait there a second, any members wish to ask any clarifying questions of what's being said? Nope. Thank you very much. I believe Councillor Wright is going to step up and speak. When you're ready, Councillor, you have 3 minutes to speak when you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon. As Tony has covered some of the technical points, I would just like to say, as one of the ward members, that I would welcome this kind of unit opening on Island Road. Island Road retail area is a very short road between High Street and Broad Street. If the application was in High Street, I would probably have a different view, but it's in a side street, and knowing how difficult it is for businesses to succeed in this area, I believe this could be a real asset. For example, I think it would be very popular for children's parties. These days, youngsters expect something different from birthday parties. Unlike when I was young, a party meant sandwiches, jelly, and pop, glass of pop. Only last week, my granddaughter went to a swimming party and a trampoline party, so I feel that a magic show would become very popular. We've spoken to proprietors in the street who welcome the idea with open arms and have no objections. There's enough parking nearby on the road on Broad Street, from the tunnel leading to the waterfront, to the Priory, where there are no houses on one side of the road. I hope the Planning Committee will feel the same way as I do. As if rejected, I feel that youngsters will be missing out on a fun activity and this unit could be empty for a very long time, as this street is not in a very desirable location for retail. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Any members wish to ask any clarification points? No, thank you very much. Finally, Councillor Charles, I believe you wish to speak on the planning application. Once again, when you're ready, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you all very much. I won't be 3 minutes. I'll just speak very quickly because I think my colleagues have made some very good points. But I would just like to reiterate some of them and ask that this property not be singled out when very similar properties with a similar application has been granted. And as the word cherry-picked has already been used today, I'd like to say that again. Also, we all know and aware if you just put up a small table and sold a few things, then this wouldn't be here today. It would have automatically been moved. We have lots of empty retail properties in Barry, and I just feel that this is a property, if which was allowed, would maybe give a lot of other people a lot of ideas, and we could get rid of some of our other empty properties. I think it would bring a lot of trade into Barry. Island View is notorious for businesses going under and not being able to make it. It is a very bad road for retail businesses such as the shops they have in High Street, but I do believe it would bring in a lot of business for businesses that are semi-struggling within High Street. We should definitely embrace this. This is a very, very unique opportunity, and I think that we should be thankful that it is coming to our town, hopefully. And in this case, I think we really need to use a common sense approach. So therefore, summing up, I would just like to ask the committee to put a move that the officer's recommendation falls and the applicant could go ahead with this very, very good idea that would actually be, I've got grandchildren, I know how much it would mean to them and a lot of other people in Barry who, for the most part, have to go out of Barry for various things, for parties. Thank you all very much for listening.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. Any members wish to ask any clarification points? Councillor Thomas.
Yeah, sorry about this. You and your colleagues have all mentioned the number of shops that have, or number of businesses that have failed in the area. Do you have any statistics on that, or any evidence that you can provide us, please?
I haven't brought any statistics, I haven't brought any evidence, but living in the area and using the area quite a lot for shopping. I used to use the fishmongers there on a regular basis, so I was well aware of the dress shop that used to be a second-hand shop, and homewares, which has actually moved to High Street because the business was doing so well, or wasn't doing hardly anything at all in that particular street.
Thank you.
And I can go back a long, long time. And
in answering the question, no statistics, but plenty of anecdotal evidence. Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Charles. Before we move to our public speaker, there's obviously a couple of questions there around policy. We'll just bring in Vicky to answer those points from the councillors, and then we'll come to you.
Thank you. I just wanted to respond on the point of the other planning application that's been highlighted, very close by at 28 High Street. The recent approval of that application followed a previous consent from a year ago, which was determined before this LDP policy was in place. The more recent application was to do with regulating some retrospective consent in respect to some extensions that had been carried out, but the change of use had been approved prior to the adoption of the LDP, so that is relevant in terms of there being a different policy context to it. But more than that, the previous consent that was granted back in 2016 was done so on the basis that that particular unit had also been vacant for some length of time. So there are other material considerations that would have justified the change of use there that aren't relevant here. We do have to look at every case on its own merits. There are always going to be slightly different circumstances in these cases. We've set out in our report why we feel that the applicant hasn't done enough so far to demonstrate that an other A1 use wouldn't work here. The property hasn't been vacant for any length of time. The previous use has only recently moved out, and therefore we don't think that we should call it a day in terms of this shop unit being a shop unit, and for the reasons we've already explained, we don't think the proposed use is akin to a shop in terms of the activities and the comings and goings that are set out.
Thank you. Now move to Mr. Jasper Blakely. Please take your seat up there. You'll have 3 minutes when you're ready.
The small space is a cultural arts venue, and at just 192 square feet, it is in fact smaller than an average UK living room. But unlike your living room, it will be happily hold 20 audience members who will be able to experience world-class UK and international magicians all inside Wales' smallest theatre. 5 Island Road has had a difficult time as a shop, with the 6 previous businesses not staying. The last one, my own family business, Homemade Wales. Now thankfully finally thriving in a great position on High Street. For almost 3 years, my wife, a marketing and branding specialist, tried to increase footfall to Island Road to make her business viable. But what became abundantly clear is that you can't beat geography. Sat between High Street and Broad Street, this short stretch of one-way road contains entirely service industry outlets, except 5 Island Road. Add to that the 43% of the businesses on Island Road have changed yet again in the last 30 months. 5 Island Road is the only retail shop on the street, so to have it shackled by your new retail ruling is unfortunate. But we know exceptions can and have already been made since the new rules introduction in July. In fact, as recently as October this year, in regard to number 28 High Street. So a precedent has already been set. Anyway, so why turn 5 Island Road into a theatre? As two local entrepreneurs, businessmen and magicians, we could see the cultural and entertainment shift that Barry has embraced. As Wales' largest town, and with so many Cardiff commuters choosing to make a home here, with all the hundreds of new homes being built, the fantastic pump house development, with cafe and restaurant, with the revitalised High Street and the Shop Local campaign and the Great Traders Association, all of which I've been a part of for several years already, we truly believe our privately funded and entirely sustainable cultural arts venue will be an asset to the town that we love. Not only that, but the interest and the excitement we've already generated has been frankly overwhelming. Through our corporate ties with the hotels like St David's and the Vale, we have already talked with them about bringing visitors to the town through our daytime corporate training sessions. In Barry itself, we've already had discussions with several local businesses on how they can be part of and benefit from our enterprise. Not only that, but several community groups have asked us about using the space during the daytime to rehearse, to meet, to workshop, to lecture, to film show reels, hold artistic showcases and to give talks. And since we don't serve food, all those visitors will happily be guided during the day to the local cafes and restaurants and to the shops. But what can we bring to Island Road itself? Yes, more footfall to benefit the daytime economy during the day, plus our shutters will actually be up more than any other business on Island Road, strictly upholding section MG14 to maintain an attractive shop frontage. Not only that, but we've also personally committed several £1,000s on CCTV to once and for all stop Island Road being the #1 reported fly-tipped area in the whole of the Vale of Glamorgan. Yes, that area is 10 feet from our front door, and finally video footage will be available to make prosecutions. But what happens if our business doesn't work? Well, it will simply return to shop status, and uniquely, we will happily surrender the alcohol licence, which has been granted just this afternoon, so that 5 Island Road cannot simply be turned into a bar, and that's a guarantee. We believe this is a forward-thinking, culturally diverse, community-enhancing, innovative and arts-promoting town, and a place that anyone should be proud to call home. And more importantly, we have always and continually enthusiastically encouraged our clients and our friends to visit. Please remember, we are and always have been proud Barry ambassadors. Thank you for your time.
3 minutes. 3 minutes. Prior to the meeting, I wondered if there would be a magic trip to extend the 3 minutes.
No, 3 minutes isn't long, and I just about managed to get it in.
So I think there was about 6 minutes worth of speech there. I'd welcome any questions or clarification members felt was needing to come out from that, and we can explore those. Councillor Parker first. And
thank you. Sorry. Yeah, congratulations from me as well. A world record. I had 2,000 words in 3 minutes. Should the committee be minded to maybe approve this application? One of the things that we're very keen to retain is an active working shopfront. In other words, it needs to retain and look like a shopfront. Perhaps you could give us confidence that that would be done in a professional manner, which I'm fairly sure the answer is going to be yes now.
There's no time limit on your answer.
Oh, fine, that's okay. I will slow down. I realise at 3 minutes you have a lot to say. So, yes, I think what has been possibly miscommunicated or certainly has not been fully expanded upon, only because we have had so many other plans, and also you don't like to blow your trumpet to all and sundry before you actually have all your plans in place. In fact, the shop shutters will be up. more than any other property on Island Road. And the simple fact is that we have, and we know we've had so much interest from it, be it from other community groups as well, that we knew we had a viable place in which we were going to rehearse. I have nine double acts that I work as myself, so therefore in terms of rehearsal space we're going to be up. The other thing to bear in mind about Island Road is that Island Road actually only opens 5 days a week. Because they actually shutter themselves, all but the cafe, on Monday, which is in fact, in complete opposite to High Street, which is open 6 days a week. The reason is that they feel there is not enough trade there. How do I know this? Is because I've stood in that shop for almost 3 years as my wife's business, Homemade Wales. It just doesn't financially work as that, and therefore that's why she's moved in, and she's flourishing on High Street now.
Thank you.
In your answer to your question, yes, of course, the shop frontage will be open. We're going to be making more other improvements. We've spent £12,000 inside already.
Thank you, sir. We've got
stuff, so, yeah.
a number of clarification
Good.
points.
I think so.
I think we've clarified. You're going to be open at the front. Councillor Driscoll, to my left.
Sorry, just answer the question.
Okay, Councillor Bird's next.
Just a quick question. Could you not, if the shutters are going to be up and somebody's going to be there, could you not just sell something simply and then we wouldn't have any issues whatsoever?
I mean, the question would be, obviously, in order to make it a viable business and having performances in the evening, we'd have to serve alcohol. So therefore, I assume that has to be the change of use, had to become something like a theatre as well in order to be able to provide those things. I didn't know if it could be a shop and also be a bar, and also in the evenings. That's a change of use. Am I correct? Am I wrong?
We'll clarify that within the debate, but thank you. We'll log that point. I'll get through the other two clarification questions. I've got Councillor Johnson first.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify something you said in the final seconds, which was about what would happen in the unfortunate case that this business did not succeed. Because some of the concern here is about, I believe, about the A1 to D2 change. But you said that you would be happy to accept that it would return to an A1 use in the case that the D2 Magicians Theatre were not to be successful. And there's questions I'll clarify with officers later on surrounding that, but just checking that, from your position, that's an acceptable thing to take. I mean, I don't have any particular problem with bars around the High Street, Broad Street area, and that's part of the area, but I'm just clarifying the offer that was being made there.
Yeah, that's true. When we discussed it with certainly with the licensing committee as well, one of their things was they would be concerned that if the bar, to them, if they were going to grant us a license, that what happens if we no longer did shows, it would just turn it into a bar. And we were told it was a unique position, that we were ready and had instructed our solicitors to draw up something that we would surrender our alcohol license, which, as you know, is I don't think that's ever been done before. Because that's how much we believe that it wants to be a theatre. It's not going to be a bar. We're not using it as a backdoor route to have something in there. That's not how it works. We're both using it as there are so many applications for it as well, in terms of, I was talking to a hedge fund manager. I was working with the Ivy in London just the other day. For instance, we've already put an application into Clarence House through 3 friends to have Prince of Wales open it. I mean, that's that's more than likely not going to happen. But in terms of just the excitement that people have said, they've come to us. We've had a major investor ask about other applications. I've already got links. The other thing is, it's not a unique position. It's not a unique business. My friend runs the TripAdvisor #1 theatre in Bristol.
I think we've clarified the answer
fine.
to the
Yeah,
question.
apologies. Oh, yes, sorry.
We debate the whole thing. It will be aired, and there's a lot of material within what you've already told us. Councillor Hodges.
When we come to the debate. Thank you. Congratulations on your alcohol licence. Can you just give us a rough idea what style you will be operating in with that licence? What are you going to sell and how? Yeah.
With the alcohol licence, we have a very good wine merchant on board, a local wine merchant on board, in order to provide quality wines at a most sensible market rate. We also have local breweries as well. We've also been talking to, I know there's one in Barry, but also Tiny Rebel. We also have a contra deal with them as well, which will allow us to be able to stock all of those craft beers as well. We're never going to compete with Wetherspoons along the road. We appreciate that's not who we are, and in fact, selling alcohol isn't our primary purpose. It's about, but as a bar, as in terms of doing that, yes, it's quality alcohol, and and they've granted it today because they have no objections.
Thank you very much. Before he steps down, just clarification from officers here. Vicky?
Thank you. I'm just conscious that I think the operation that you're describing in answering your questions to members is not akin with what has been submitted as part of the planning application when officers have asked for clarification on the nature of the operation. So I do think it's useful for the applicant to perhaps answer more points of clarification as members may have them, simply because the application that we're considering on what we've based this report on is an assumption based on what's been submitted to us that the premises will only be open during events, you know, 3 or 4 times a month. The rest of the time the premises are closed for practicing space. Now, if what's being suggested is actually a retail element with, you know, a member of staff operating it as a shop with selling goods and people coming and going, then that is a different proposal to what's part of the application. So I can see you shaking your head. I'm asking you the question. I'm not setting that out to myself. I'm trying to seek clarification because I don't think it is clear what the application is for in that respect, and it all hangs in what the use is.
Yes, at no point have we said that it would ever be a shop retailing any goods. The other clarification to say that you know, when we're rehearsing, it will be open. It will be opening us to rehearse. And the other thing, of course, is that it's a hired space as well. So the other people coming in will actually be other people rehearsing in that space, be it from, I know we have a collection of international balloon models, for instance, who want to use it as a space on a monthly basis to use that as well. And we've had lots of people come to us, you know, Clowns International as well, and other entertainers, and we've had, I could go on, the list is quite extensive for shooting show reels and so on and so forth. So in terms of an active space, which is a creative space in which we can use and rent it as such and lease it in that much, then it is, well, we've been overwhelmed by the sport, not just from Cardiff, we've had people from Bristol as well wanting to do stuff. We've just obviously now been part of a BBC One Primetime UK documentary following the whole process as well.
Thank you. Councillor Parker next.
Yeah, I'm in the same position as Vicky. I've read 3 or 4 times already tonight MG14, and I'm getting a lot more yeses than nos. So I would move a deferment while clarification is sought out, particularly bearing in mind the position of this one. And the one that I go back to, which is why I asked the question obviously, is that if we can maintain a satisfactory shop front that looks like a shop front, then that, I believe, would overcome a great deal of the objection. So I would move a deferment for clarification.
So moving and seconding around deferring in order to consider the application as is now described. That's what we're talking about. Vicky?
Yeah, I query it because the purpose of a live shop frontage is that it does still operate a bit like a shop and that people come and go. There's no point in having a live frontage if behind that the door is closed and people are not coming and going, and it's being used to all intents and purposes as a private space for people to practice their act, which is what I think you've just described. I'm happy to defer the application and seek more clarification for members, but what I don't want to do is to lead us down a route of something that is not what you're proposing. I don't know. I feel it's a bit confused, that the messages that are coming forward, because when Councillor Bird suggested about a retail type use and shop, you nodded along and implied that was a prospect, but your later clarification seems to contradict that, and I'm happy to go away and do that, but to bring it back to members, you know, I think members need to be clear as well about what your level of expectation would be in terms of having an active shop frontage, in terms of having an active retail type use.
So just to clarify here, the committee is considering a report written based on the evidence submitted to the officer prior to the meeting. This committee have had that circulated to them a week before this meeting, have read the details of that, and the deferring issue in front of us is around whether or not the committee feel that, in view of the number of answers you're potentially giving that are different to the report, there needs to be further discussion between yourselves and the planning officers to bring something back, or indeed just to approve it prior to, without coming back to the committee. That's what we're discussing, just to clarify that. Councillor Johnson put his hands up in the air first, and then Councillor, I will come back to you for some comment in a second.
I was just, I mean, we had a discussion earlier when we were talking about Haydog House about, you know, the impact of deferral or not. Obviously, this is an entrepreneur who wants to set up a business within one of our you know, designated town centre areas. I'm just looking for clarification, both from either from you know, from the gentleman or from officers about the time that we required for this to come back, or the impact upon their calendar for being able to open and actually start operations. Because what I would not like to see is, you know, is deferral for the sake of getting more information that actually, you know, works against the best interests of a local resident, a local entrepreneur who wants to do something in this town. So I'm just wanting, if deferral is being proposed, then I'd like a, you know, time scale of both, you know, because I want the you know, the resident entrepreneur here to lose out by a decision not being made.
Yeah, I understand the point. In terms of timeline, officers wish to comment on timeline for deferrals. Obviously, I guess it would depend on
it would very much depend on what information comes from the applicant. You know, obviously we would try to bring it back as quickly as we could, but it would depend on what comes back from the applicant.
Okay, next on my list is Councillor Hodges, and then I'll come to Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Chairman. I actually would now like to have a bit of a discussion. I realise there's been an asking for a deferment, but I'd like a discussion around policy, because that's the reason.
If I stop for a second,
well, that's the reason
if we're finishing with,
Chairman.
We haven't finished clarifying certain points with the applicant, and whether or not we can clarify everything he's talking about the current application as to whether we defer or not is the current issue. If we're going to start talking about the policy and debating it, then I'll excuse our speaker from there.
Well, if anyone else has got any questions for him, I'd be grateful, because I think he's answered everything he can so far very well.
Councillor Bird.
I think it's more of a statement rather than a question. If the applicant was to sell something from the premises, it would not have to come back to this committee, because it would not need planning permission.
Any final comments before we then move on to the debate? Obviously,
yes,
Councillor
I'm
Hodges
a little bit.
in.
Oh, sorry. If planning officer can confer, I'm slightly confused. So I can operate as a shop and operate as a theatre and operate as a bar under a shop. So I can just sell one item and we don't need to come back at all.
That was a question you asked before. We'll get the clarity on that, and then you can answer.
It would become a mixed use, and it would still require planning permission, because it's an A1 use as it is now. But that's not to say that mixed use, because it included retailing, for example, would then not be in compliance with the policy. But I think ultimately where we are is that the policy seeks to prevent dead frontages and uses which are not going to be open in the day. And I think obviously a deferral would give us the chance to re-explore that. That has tried to be explored with the applicant in the past, but I think it would give us a chance to re-explore what the exact way it's operating.
Thank you. I think we clarified the questions in terms of your comments, Mr. Blakely. I don't think there's anything else we need to ask. I certainly agree with Councillor Hodges. You've been very full in what you've answered here. Another question of clarification, Constance Johnson?
I was going to say that I did ask a question about the impact of deferral or delay upon the business and the viability of the business. Just some clarification.
Yeah, two-part officers and yourself. In terms of the timeline for you.
Obviously, we were very much hoping that we'd been granted previously in order to make most of what is in fact as you know, within the retail world and even within the performance world, which is the most financially beneficial time, which is the 3 months leading up to Christmas. Obviously that is now going to impact on us slightly. The other thing to bear in mind is that we actually have the smallest legal tenancy agreement, because the unit itself is so precarious. We have a 30-day notice on our lease, because that's all that the letting agency would like to grant us. And that's not because of the trust that it's held in, having been a Jack Brown booking shop, and obviously having been a florist, having been a bookshop, having been 2 other retail outlets. That is the other reason as well. So in terms of the impact on it, can we go away? We've been offered 2 other retail spaces in Cardiff. It's not what I want to do. Just not where I want to go, because I live in Barry and I want to, and I'm part of the Trades Association, and my wife has a shop on there. But ultimately, and there's no veiled threat, it's nothing like that, but we'd like it to be in Barry. We very much like to do what we do. We're both world-class magicians. Our friends are world-class magicians. We're going to bring them. I've had someone from Las Vegas even today said, come, I want to perform. So in terms of that, the shop frontage, I think I've answered, saying that the shutters will be up. And it will be used as a public space in as much as hiring and the rest of it. You've got that. And yeah, so to clarify, what will the impact be? The impact will be... I think it may not happen in terms of the deferment period. That there is a distinct possibility, and that's not a threat. That's just the reality.
This section of the meeting is certainly not meant to be an interrogation of the person sat up there, but clearly there have been many clarification points. I'm going to move on to the debate in the motion now. There's a motion in front of us for deferment. So Mr. Blakely, thank you very much. You can step down. I thank you for your participation. By all means, stay in the chamber. As before, we debated the deferment before we talked about the policy. I think that is prudent too, because if we are deferring, that can obviously have an effect on what we're discussing now. Councillor Johnson.
So can I disagree with your interpretation of that, Chair? The reason for the deferral previously was for a process issue. This is a question of whether we, I believe the deferral was being proposed by Councillor Parker because we wanted more information. But I think we can still have that debate first, and then have the vote on the deferral prior to having a vote on the substantive motion. Does that make sense, that we can discuss the issues?
I understand what you're saying, but I disagree that it's completely different to the previous one, because we are talking about process. There's a planning report brought to the committee with all the detail of the intended business use. They've obviously made a recommendation based on those points. There's a suggestion that maybe a different recommendation, or certainly a different flavour to what would have happened if the points were known differently. Certainly there have been answers here tonight which may well put members into a decision where they don't understand exactly what is happening. So I don't disagree with the idea of talking more about the policy. Certainly I'm happy to take it under advisement from the committee, but I don't think it's completely different, because we are talking about process, and the process we debated for your deferment previously was around consultation. This is around thoroughness and the completeness of a report, which is different to what's been put in front of us and what was circulated prior to. So I do think there are similarities. Any other members wish to comment on the decision around deferment discussion first? Councillor Bird?
Right. Is it possible in any way, because I think we're all relatively, pretty supportive of the business, where it's just going against policy, but there seems to be a way around it. Would it be possible to condition certain elements and we grant a short-term permission pending a review in maybe 18 months or 2 years?
Obviously, we could grant a temporary permission here. We usually only grant temporary permissions where we want to assess the impact of the development. So, for example, for highway-related matters or that sort of thing. But I do think this is the type of scenario where you may want to grant a temporary consent to judge whether or not the nature of the use is adding to the vibrancy and vitality of the town centre, or it is, as we are concerned in terms of the officer's assessment of what's been submitted, that it's actually a bit of a dead space in the centre for the majority of the time. So I'd support that, and I think in terms of it being justified, I guess there's not an enormous amount of works around changing the use of the premises. So in other words, you're not putting the developer to an enormous amount of expense, and only granting him a 1 year or 2 year consent, that sort of thing, where we'd also have some concerns about that. So I do think this is the kind of situation where we could, in theory, look at that. I think that, we'd have difficulty with conditions over things like you must have your shutters open throughout the day, or you must, there are going to be certain things that we can condition and certain things that we can't. And I think we need to be satisfied that what is being proposed is an active and lively use that's going to benefit the town centre, rather than what I think has been described to us so far to date in the application.
I've got a number of people who wish to speak. I'm happy to talk further on the policy implications if there is a third way to this, but I hope you can recognise my need to have a thoroughness in understanding when we give a permission or don't give a permission, that all the information is in front of the committee to be able to refer back on what we've been asked to talk about. Councillor Hodges, I don't want to go over.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm ever so glad that I called this in, otherwise this would have been refused under delegated powers. I took the time to have a look at this scheme and have a look and be shown around the premises, which you must remember is probably, I stand to be corrected, probably the smallest retail shop in the whole of the Vale, let alone Barry. It is tiny. And there is the rub. If you actually look at the plan on page 111, you literally have to seek it out. You literally have to seek it out. It is tiny. And it is a problem area which I believe will be solved as a result of it. Now, I wanted to talk about policy because I want, as I always ask, that Council fulfills its role in a joined-up way. Planning is not only the use of land, it's also furthering economic regeneration. A report went to Cabinet on the 20th of March this year, and it's the Sense of Place Regeneration in Barry, clarifying the story, providing a contemporary position for Barry. The big idea, Barry making waves, development activity influences how a space, a place, Barry, presents itself and eventually how it is perceived. The brand of Barry harnesses Barry's assets, existing and future developments and personality, and builds on the brand offer for the town. It goes out of its way to define its history, its heritage, and I think also to push on its tourism development. And this is what this application is. It is a tourism development. Not only is it quality, largely adult entertainment for the people of Barry, but for people from beyond who would be brought to Barry who may not come to Barry for anything else in any other way. And I think we've heard about the positive knock-ons for the restaurants, the bars, and possibly even our hotel business, such as it is in Barry. I think the brand that is trying to be factored in here, the sense of place, has to be factored into the policy making of the culture, entertainment opportunities for our town. One thing I was surprised with in the whole report, when we go out to consultation on anything and everything, the first issues that came up were the impact on the neighbouring residential properties, and no one has complained or put anything forward, and the impact upon highway safety and parking provision, and that was quickly withdrawn. To me, the issue now simply comes down to policy, and that is the change of use from an A1 to what's deemed as a D2, and I must admit I had to look up D2 when I first heard of it, because I've never seen in all my years a D2 application. And this is where we have to make a decision. And the decision is a tiny, tiny, tiny shop, and you'll be amazed how tiny it is. You could fit upstairs and downstairs 3 times into the Barry Town Council chamber. You could fit it probably 40 times into this chamber. It is tiny, and I think it is unviable as a shop as it presently stands. Now, you have to make a decision. Do you want innovation? Do you want an exciting opportunity? Do you want a tourism jewel in our town? Or do you want to lose on that simply because of policy which is over-restrictive? I will say this, when you have the whole of the High Street Traders organisation, who are always concerned about their shopping area, having no concerns on this, and actually thinking that this will bolster their trade rather than deter from it, I think it's something we should look at in good detail. But it's also interesting that in the applications here, in the contributions, we have nothing from a town centre manager, we have nothing from tourism, and I would have thought that this would be exciting opportunities and proposals. I don't want all our tourism contained on Barry Island. I want it out and proud in the town. I want it out there so that it's spread throughout the town. And I think that this is an excellent plan, which is why I called it in, because I didn't want it to be lost through any confusion on a officer's delegated decision. And I think the standard of the presentation and the questions that have been asked, I think show that there is a general idea that this is a goer. And whether it's granted temporarily or permanently, I think that this is a fantastic opportunity for our town, and we need to grasp it. And I'll wait to see what happens about deferral, but if there's no deferral, I'll move that it is granted.
Thank you, Councillor Hodges. Marcus?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, obviously, unfortunately, because it has been called to committee, any deferral means that it has to go to the next committee, unless committee were minded to advise that delegated decision could be taken in respect of any further information that is submitted. I have, while I've been looking at while everyone's been talking, looked at the supporting information that came in, and it is perhaps unfortunate that while we always recommend agents are used to support applications, very little supporting information, certainly none around the type that's come from the applicant, has come in with this application, and they've really been one-word answers to questions about the frontage and the type of use, and it would have been much more useful. I noticed that the planning officer tried on 5 occasions to get a bit more information about how it was operating, and it really hasn't come back with any great amount of information. And it's a shame, because obviously the planning officer was talking to an architect or consultant who's been appointed to do this, but not to the applicant themselves, so they weren't getting the full flavour of information. I would like, I think, the ability to go through it again with the applicant, to be able to look at that and hopefully draft some conditions which could deal with this going forward. One other issue, obviously, and from very much a procedural issue, if this were to be approved today, because it has a licensed premises, we do have to be careful that everything ties up together in terms of hours. And I haven't got that information to hand, and I can't get it through the system at the moment. So I think it would be much better if it was deferred, so we could go through all that and come to a different conclusion, perhaps with the relevant conditions attached. It sounds different, very much different to the type of use that's been proposed by the applicant here today. It sounds very different to what information we had submitted as part of the application. So, if it was delegated, we could do this in a very short space of time, and we could turn it around within a week. In fact, as it stands, we would have to come back in January to planning committee. I don't know if there's a way around that. I don't really think.
Is it a procedural point? Because I've got 4 other people.
Yeah, procedural point I'm asking. If committee were to agree to it, could we agree to reaffirm officers' delegation?
Yes, because decisions like that have been taken in the past, where a decision to approve has been taken subject to no further objections, for example, when the date has moved on. So what I would say is, subject to no further delegation be granted back to officers, subject to no further objections being received. That would prevent any possible ombudsman issue in the future.
Okay, I've still got a fairly chunky list of people who wanted to speak. You're not at the top of it, unfortunately, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Burnett is next.
Thank you. I think that finding a way through is probably the right answer, if it can be done speedily. I think that the committee is more and more positive about this application. I would echo that, but I also think that when we talked about there not being a sufficient time.
Sorry, can I just stop you there?
Yeah.
Can we have one meeting? I'm really sorry, Councillor Bird. I don't want to pull the process into disrepute by not being party to all the conversations that are going on in the centre. Yeah. And I don't want anyone to question the way in which the information has come through to the committee. Right. If you want to start again, Liz, sorry about that.
Well, no, I'm just saying that in some ways, if we're going to look at it, it's we've got a process normally where we look and see if a property's been marketed, etc. I think a lot of us have, because it was such a good shop before, have been in that property. But a lot of us know that it was a real struggle. Even though it was an exceptionally good business. I mean, I was with Mrs. Blakely when she spoke eloquently to the chief economist of the Bank of England when he visited Barry Island, and about the struggles. The position off the high street is a struggle, and I'm really thrilled that they've moved to such a prominent position in high street and are doing really well with even more amazing things. And Mr. Blakely hasn't mentioned the contribution he's made. I can remember the sort of the deck chair dandies and all that sort of thing. They have been a part of every initiative that has been run in terms of local shopping, in terms of regeneration, in terms of events on the island, everything. And so in terms of people that are totally committed to this town and taking things forward, I don't think, if we've got any concerns over what's going to happen in the future, I would say look at the past, look at the history of their contribution to this town over the last 5 years, and I think that we've got our answer. So if it takes a deferment, I would support that, but I would wholeheartedly support this application, because we don't want to miss this sort of opportunity. This is something that could be really special for Barry, so, and it deserves to have a chance. So, you know, if it takes a deferral, so be it. But if we can find a way of getting the words today and taking a vote, then I look around the way people are nodding and say, well, why don't we do it today?
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. I did promise Margaret you'd be next. Councillor Parker needs to leave.
Yes, apologies, Chair. I actually got to pick up 2 other ward members, so my life is in their hands. I will withdraw my motion.
Because you're not going to be in the room.
Because I won't be in the room.
Okay.
But apologies, I've got to leave, but I've got no alternative.
So we withdraw of the motion, the seconding withdrawn, and...
Yeah, I am happy to withdraw that, but I would like to make another in my turn.
Okay, Councillor Wilkinson, thank you for your patience. Please make your point.
I just begin to wonder how many meetings was going on, that's all. There was going on everywhere.
I was trying to prevent that from happening, and I would remind members I don't want to have any situation where we can have this called back or appealed.
No, that's it. That is the trouble, because someone could, and members of the public are watching this, so they could pull it back. But can I say, I am amazed this has gone on for so long. This is a little business that would bring different people to this town, and I am amazed that we're trying to bring all kinds in front of us, that we object it. I want this little business to come because I want other little businesses to come as well. All different businesses are welcome in this town, and we need to move forward, and even if we only give a temporary for now until we get everything else in gear, I want this to happen tonight, because that gentleman wants to start his business and we want it in this town. So it's about time we encouraged businesses to this town, not throw them out.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Next on my list is Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm in danger of agreeing with all the previous speakers on this, but always a first. High Street shopping area is our most diverse shopping area. It's open all day, and it's open most of the night as well. I think that being overly restrictive with our policies, while I perfectly accept the reason for those policies and I support those policies, I think this is an example of somewhere where that policy should be expanded, and we should look at the opportunities that are available. So whatever way that that we can conjure up to do that tonight, I think would be welcomed. There is a further lesson though, which I think that Marcus referred to earlier, or Victoria, so one of the officers referred to earlier, which is about how we do engage with small businesses that maybe are not quite as au fait with the planning process as our officers are. It's very can be very difficult, can be very confusing, and you know the fact that a decision was going to be made on the basis of perhaps, with no offence to the individuals concerned, perhaps their knowledge of the planning system. In these situations, we are the professionals, and other people may be doing these things are amateurs, and ensuring that the line of information, knowledge, etc., is fair, is important. It's a different case when we're dealing with large multinational companies and agents. It's quite important that we get it right when we're dealing with small businesses in this kind of area.
Are you seconding Councillor Hodges' motion?
I'll second whatever it is that's accepting it tonight, in whatever format. I'm aware. Can we be reminded? Yeah, I was going to say.
We'll come back to that.
I was going to say, I know
but now the deferment's been removed, the only motion on the table, which now is seconded, was there. But Vicky, if you could. To grant the application, to overturn officer recommendations and grant the application, that was the motion moved by Councillor Hodges. So, but okay, so you can in a second. So that was around. You were making the same point he was, and at the moment I didn't have that down, so that's why I was asking if you were seconding it.
I'll second that motion. I'll obviously be very interested to hear the officers' recommendations on this. But I think the principle is clear that we would support what is in an agreement tonight that allows them to operate, and whatever conditions are required to do that.
Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I hear everything that members have said, and I hope you realise from both our report and from what we've said that actually, I think had we been more aware of more of the type of business that was being proposed, officers probably would have looked at it in a different way. I feel that it is necessary to make sure that we don't set a harmful precedent for future applications for loss of A1 in our town centres, which members have said are generally supportive of that principle. I think it is important that we get the correct information in front of us to justify a departure from the policy, which I don't feel we have had to date. I'm sure the applicant can provide that swiftly, given that a lot of it's been given verbally. But things like support from the local traders association, we have no evidence of that. Support from evidence that the existing business has struggled as an A1 use, we don't have any evidence of that. All of those things count in favour for granting planning permission, and had we had that information, officers may well have come to a different viewpoint. So what I would ask members is to consider a short deferment on the basis of getting that information together to support what members want to do, and to draw together necessary conditions to control the future use of the application. And by all means we can determine that under delegated powers if you are happy to do so, in terms of leaving it with us to approve subject to conditions. That is something that I think procedurally we could deal with in terms of the scheme of delegation. It's been called in for committee because we were recommending refusal on the basis that if that recommendation changed in view of the additional information that's been put forward tonight, and with necessary conditions to control hours of operation and the shop frontage and so on.
Just to back up what Vicky has said, it's really, really important that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. While I understand completely why you're concerned about the policy situation with this particular premises, I would hate, for example, for it to be used as an example by someone with a bigger shop on High Street or whatever, who just wanted to shut and turn it into flats or whatever it might be. When we've got strong policy position now, far better that we are able to find the right way through it in a very short space of time, and get it to a point where we can allow a development here, but it won't create a really uncomfortable precedent for for this shopping area and other shopping areas in the Vale going forward, because I think we all appreciate how important they are, and that the protection of them is really, really important. So I mean, that's I think from our point of view, we're very much of the opinion we wish we'd had this information before we came to this point, and I think if we had it, we would have made a different decision.
If it's relating to the calling, and I've got 4 people who want to speak at this point. Can you put your microphone on so everyone at home can hear as well?
Certainly.
I'm sure they're all still tuned in.
Just looking at the plan on 118 of the shopping area, I'm minded of what you say. The green dot all the way up top, the top there on its own, is a covenant application in for a conversion there from vacant restaurant to, that's the boy, vacant restaurant to housing. That I suggest wouldn't be able to argue the toss on this one because it's completely different. My only concern is this: I am happy to remove the call-in and put it back to delegation if after you get the information and within a reasonable time you are minded to allow with conditions. If when you get the information you're not minded to allow, I would like it to come back to committee. That's all I ask. That's all I ask.
That is my proposal, that we defer.
Microphone on, please.
Right. My proposal is that we defer this application, we reinstate officers' delegation with the condition that, subject to the correct information being given, that an approval is to be granted. If an approval is not to be granted, it would come back to planning committee. Can we do that?
There's absolutely no reason why, and I think we obviously, as a matter of course, given what you've talked about today, if we were not satisfied and we're going to refuse it, we'd bring it back to committee. Right. But I hope I hope we're not in that position. I'll be honest with you.
I have on my list of people still to speak. I realise things are shifting, and I also want to bring this to a close in as positive a way as possible for the applicant. Are you seconding? No. Okay, Councillor Thomas, please.
Yeah.
Eddie
thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Yeah, apologies for going slightly off-piste earlier. I wanted to clarify something with Mr. Blakely. As I understand it from him, he was advised that it would not be possible. He was advised by planning that he couldn't apply. He couldn't keep the shop open as a retail shop and apply for the.
I mean, he made that point in his statement.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to support the resolution of this evening. I see no reason. Failing that, though, I would like to know what conditions the officers have in mind. Finally, on a point of information for Councillor Hodges, I think you'll find that there are 2 shops that are a lot smaller in Penarth by the Padge and the Serenic Silver.
I think a minor point within the conjecture. Okay, in terms of motions, is there anything anyone wants to say before we vote on various things? The first motion in front of us, are you happy to receive the proposal around deferment first? Councillor Hodges and Councillor Johnson. Next on my list is Councillor Cave and then Councillor Wilkinson.
It's just a point of clarity, really. When we speak about a short time, I just wonder whether Marcus or Victoria could give us some understanding of what they mean by in a short period of time.
I think the answer would be as soon as the applicant gets the information to us, we'll take the appropriate decision.
Okay.
There will be, what I would add there is, because of the conditions necessary, we will need to check with licensing colleagues about the 2 issues, because one other thing from this is that just to check the type of conditions that you would expect us to be putting on. They will include hours of operation, obviously. We would certainly be trying to encourage the applicant to keep the frontage in an open way, so we'll look at the type of conditions. We have done conditions around frontages in the past to ensure that there's an active frontage, so I can't see why we couldn't do that. And thirdly, one issue that came up was the issue of a temporary consent to allow the applicant to essentially prove that the use is what it's, and I would recommend that, so that perhaps a 12-month consent to allow the applicant to show that the use is viable and generates vitality in the town centre. I suggest that's on there. I think if we were looking at something like this, which is a little bit out of the ordinary, it is essentially a mixed use because of the bar and the theatre and the possibility of something else going on in terms of practicing and rehearsing. I think it would be better that it is dealt with like that, but I suggest that would be what you would want to do.
Councillor Wilkinson, we share the concern to move it on. Your point, please.
Well, I'm getting a bit confused. Can we do a temporary one tonight, now, or do we have to go away and let you decide on all this? Yeah, I'm getting confused here, but every application that comes in here is dealt on their own merit. We're not setting any examples. Let's just put that out of sight. Every application that comes in here, we look at their own merits. But can I just get to it? Can we have a temporary opening tonight, please, or not?
I can't guarantee you. I can't put the hours of operation that are recommended as part of the licence and also by colleagues in SRS. I can't line those up at the moment, but we can do it in a very short space of time. Those people aren't here, so I can't do that now.
So
I would hope so.
In short, the answer is no because of the detail, but officers will be dealing with this straight afterwards. That's what we're talking about, and the information. I'm going to move it to a vote on the motion around deferment, removing the call-in and dealing it with delegated powers, subject to that being approved. Otherwise, it would come back to committee. All those in favour of them working with the applicant to resolve this matter swiftly? Yeah, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Blakely, for your patience. They withdrew the motion. Yeah. We have one more item on the agenda before the committee leave the building. As referenced at the beginning of the meeting, there is an item under item 10, urgent information. It is tabled. It was circulated via email this morning. I don't believe it will take as long to discuss, but I don't want to prejudge it. I already have the culprit who said it was going to be under 2 hours, but I won't reveal the name just yet. Item 10, who's going to speak on this? Marcus.
Thank you, Chair, yes. And the culprit is not sitting very far from me. So the purpose of this report relates back to reports which members may recall came before them. It was an unauthorised development out at Llanwrch Vineyard for a hotel development which had originally been granted planning permission but which was constructed considerably larger and a different design to what was originally approved. You will recall officers were very concerned that it was proceeding quite quickly, and at that time enforcement notice was authorised and a stop notice. Now, since that has happened, a new planning application has come in and there have been considerable negotiations. These have culminated in the applicant finally agreeing to make some changes to the design of the proposal to make it more in accordance with what we consider to be suitable in that location and more similar to what was originally approved. Ultimately, the building that's there is completely open to the weather, and so we are seeking with this report just to remove the stop authorization for you to give us permission to remove the stop notice, not the enforcement notice, but the actual stop notice which stops them doing any further works, so they can weather tight the building over the Christmas period. We are expecting amended plans. If they haven't already been received, we're expecting them in the next day or so, and then a planning application for the approval of those works will come before you hopefully in January, and that will deal with the issue of the enforcement notice. So this is solely to remove the stop notice.
Move off to recommendations. All those in favour?
Aye.
Swift hands. Thank you very much. Have a fantastic Christmas, and we'll see you in the new year. Thank you.
Last year, I didn't even want that. I probably will when I get